Drums are such an important part of hip hop. They can really make or break a beat, no pun intended there either. And today what I thought I'd do is show you some of the things that I do to treat my drums or edit and change the sounds of my drums in order to make them work with beats, in order to make them sound a little bit better. I think I've got 5 different things to show you guys, so hopefully after this, if you've been struggling with your hip-hop drums or drums for your beats, then you should have a little bit more knowledge and should be able to get some better sounds. I'm on the SP404 today, but to be honest, I do this on pretty much every sampler or music software that I create hip-hop on. I'm always doing similar things that I'm going to show you here. So if you've got an MPC, if you work in FL Studio, if you work in Ableton, you should be able to apply these skills. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and import some drums first of all. I'm going to use my packs as usual. These are all available in the description. There's links there, and I'll tag the products as well. We'll use Lo-Fi Drums Volume 6 today. This is my latest pack. We'll get a hat. Not too fussy about what I'm selecting here. And finally, we just need to get a kick as well. Okay, that should do it. So I'm going to have to go straight back into import again now, because the first thing that I want to show you guys is layering drums. Now, this is a very well-known technique for beefing up your drums and making them sound better. So we'll go into my other pack, Hip Hop Drums. We'll get another kick. And what we're going to do is play both of these kicks at the same time. And you can hear that gives a pretty crazy sound. We can actually link these together using pad link on this device. So Shift and 7. You should have an equivalent on your sampler as well. So there we go. I've put those in a pad link group. And now if I press either of those, both of them play. And we can go in and change the individual levels of those two sounds to get whatever mix we want. So for example, on 9, I might just change the volume of that. I just want a bit of the character of it, not too much. That's it with it full. So somewhere there sounds quite nice. We're getting that little bit of character at the end, but we're still getting the thud of 13. And then what we can do is resample that. Okay, and delete both of those. And we'll move this across back to here. And now got a much thicker kick, a much nicer sounding kick, because we've layered 2 kicks together. Got a little bit more character, a little bit more thud, and that's going to sound really nice in the mix. Now, obviously it really depends what kind of beat you're working on, but layering drums is pretty much an acceptable way to approach drums in pretty much every beat that you're making. So the next thing that I want to show you guys is on the snares. Now, snare here, something that I do a lot. I'm just going to take gate off so that it plays the full sample. I might change the tail. Now, I do this a lot, so I'll go into the waveform here and I'll really dial back that endpoint and listen to the difference this makes to the sample. So we're getting a much more snappy sound if we change the endpoint. This is something that I do very, very commonly. Depending on what I want that snare to sound like in the mix, I'll reduce the tail quite heavily like this. You can hear there, you can either have the tail kind of ringing out, it's got like a reverb on it, or we can just completely remove that with the endpoint and get something really snappy like that. We could also do a similar thing with an envelope. So we'll go to Shift and Envelope, and maybe we'll change the release. And we'll change the hold. So there we go, we've got much different character to that snare there. And this is a really cool thing to do if you've got a bunch of drums. Say you've got my Lo-Fi Drums Volume 6 pack. You can completely change the sound of a snare and the character of it. Even though there's 16 snares in the pack, if you start editing them and changing them around like this, you've basically almost got an infinite amount of sounds. So there we go. I really like that snare sound. Nice stubby little sound. And it's really crisp, and I'm enjoying that one. Okay, next, this is another really, really common thing. I will do this across my kick, snares, and hi-hats pretty much on every single beat, and that is to change the pitch of the drums. Now, for kicks, for example, I usually pitch down a bit to get a more boomy, sort of lower sound. That actually sounds really nice at 5, and I need to take gate off this as well. That's a really nice sounding kick, that. I really like that. So -5 on the kick there for the snare. If I want it much more punchy and more snappy, I'll pitch it up. That's sounding pretty nice. Nice high end to it. We can reduce that if we want a different sound. There we go. So you can play around with the character of the sound and change around with how punchy a snare is as well using pitch. And I like to do it with hi-hats too. The volume of that needs to come down a bit. And that is something to be aware of. When you change the pitch, sometimes the volume does need a little bit of adjustment. I can't get too technical about that because I'm not really sure how to explain it properly. But yeah, I've definitely found that when changing the pitch of certain sounds, you need to adjust the volume accordingly as well. And there we go, those are sounding really, really nice there. So another thing that is very common with hip-hop drums is adding compression. It brings everything together, it adds a fatness, a thickness, and that's something that I tend to do on pretty much all my beats. So we'll go and add my bus 3 and 4, and I'll quickly show you what those are. We'll go to Shift and 16 to see EFX settings. And you can see here in my 3 and 4, we've got compression and 303 vinyl sim, which I'm using for compression as well. You can see here, 303 vinyl sim, 45 comp, no noise, no flutter. And in 3, I've got a compressor with just 30 ratio, no sustain, no attack. That's the two settings I've got on 3 and 4 at the moment. And I use the wheel and bus FX to turn those on. You can see here on the corner, I can turn them off and on. So we'll turn those on. And now we should hear a slightly beefier sound. And there we go, if we turn those off. Doesn't sound bad without it, to be honest, but just putting that compression on just pulls it together a little bit nicer. They're sounding really, really nice. I like the sound of these drums, to be honest. They've come out pretty well, considering I was just kind of playing around for an experiment for this video. Okay, so we'll turn those compressors off for now. The final thing that I want to show you guys, which I do quite a lot, is to add MFX to my drum hits. Now, you can do this on all sorts of devices like Ableton. You can do it with the MPCs. You can add effects and usually resample in some way to get it permanently on that effect. Or with the MPC, you can add it to the track so it's permanently on your snare track if you've got that on an isolated track. And yeah, the workflow with the SP is really to add an effect and then resample it. So, for example, on this one, I might do some EQ. That's just a really basic thing. I might take out that low end. Something like that. We could add an equalizer and then resample it. I might go for something a bit more creative. So let's say, for example, Crusher. Could again resample that and have that permanently on. And of course you could resample multiple times to get some really interesting results. Check out the video where I resampled a drum loop 16 times just with one effect. Got some really crazy results out of that, so check out the link above. But yeah, the possibilities with the MFX on the SP are pretty endless. You get loads of stuff like this on DAWs, etc. as well. And you can make your drums really unique by adding effects like this. I think one last thing that I want to mention and put a bit more emphasis on is the isolator or equalizer. I tend to do this a lot more in my DAW when I'm working in Ableton, but on the SP, you can do the same sort of thing. So we can do remain to show the values. We can add more low to the kick. Maybe take out some highs. We're getting a much lower sound there now. Or if you want a bit more definition, we can turn the high up. Really is personal preference, but isolator is a great effect, or the equalizer, to make your drums sit in the mix where you want them to sit. Generally speaking, I'd say I tend to take a bit of high off my kicks because I like them to sound low and thuddy. Then generally speaking, this is very general because it changes from beat to beat. A snare, I'd probably add a bit of high end just to give it a bit more snap. And with the hats, Again, that's personal taste, but a lot of the time with hats, I tend to just reduce the highs a little bit because I find hi-hats to be quite harsh and I like mine to sit quite low in the mix. So yeah, isolators is a really good way of kind of balancing your drums out and getting them to sit properly in the mix where you want them to sit. So I hope those tips were useful, guys. If you've got any of your own, then please leave them in the comments below, and it really helps the community out. And just want to say a big shout out to my members. Check out the membership roles that I've got at the moment. I've just added a brand new one if you want to see some more behind the scenes content. And I'll be back with another video very, very soon.